Hello, and welcome to Pinball in the Machine. This is a podcast by awakeners for awakeners. And this is where we discuss the what the hell just happened aspect of what might loosely be termed spiritual awakening. Each week, Tom and I meet to discuss our progress or otherwise. And this is from those conversations, and we hope that by sharing our experiences, we can assist others to develop holistically. I'm Greg, and here's my dear friend Tom. Good morning, Tom. How you doing?
Morning, Greg. I'm well, thank you.
Good. What's about?
Well, this week I wondered whether I could talk to you briefly about my 40th birthday, which is tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, you're not invited, but
Oh,
it's okay.
okay then.
The reason I wanted to talk to you about it is that the standard response you get to anybody when you say you're turning 40 is, "Are you okay?"
Yes.
Because it seems to be that either the majority of people have themselves or know of somebody that has gone from this age of 39 to 40 and has had some difficulty dealing with it. I'm not sure whether it's the fact that it's a sort of a transit. It feels like a transition into middle life, or you've got so much life under your belt that there's this kind of assessment going on of your life, and you start worrying about things or criticizing yourself. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that I firmly believe that mainly because of the kind of the conversations that we've been having over the last 2 years and the things that we've been practicing, that I've arrived here in a completely different place to perhaps where I would have done otherwise, or what might be seen as a normal reaction, because I feel absolutely great about it. I was almost at one point wanting it faster than it was. I wanted to get to it quicker because I felt like I was there. I'm definitely excited about the next decade, but and I think we might talk about it a bit later. But really, what I've found from a practical side with what we've been doing is that I've lost a lot of the fear.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, your reactions to these big life events can be considerably different.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was 40, it was a tough one. I was very afraid and got to the time when there must be more to life than this, I thought. And that was, I guess, a big dark night of the soul, which we'll be talking about later, I hope. But yeah, it was a huge watershed for me.
Yeah. So here I am, and I'm feeling sort of very positive about all that stuff.
Great. So we were talking last week about chaos, and we said, okay, we'll get into chaos this week. And when I was journeying, it kind of dropped in that this actually links with a question. And I can't remember exactly who asked the question. And it's really great that people are asking questions. It's fantastic. And, I'm really loving it. But it was something about knowing um, that how do you know, or if you know, does that mean nobody can question you or something like that? Do you remember the question?
Was it the one? Yeah, if you get to a point where you're feeling you're in a good place, does it mean that you're right all the time? Is that the one? And how are you defining right?
Ah, right. Yeah. That's the one. That's the one. Yeah, yeah. What does the knowing mean, sort of thing? That was what I took from the question, I think.
I think yes. I think that there were individuals were puzzled about how knowing could be knowing.
Right. What's your take on that?
Well, um, I have been for a little while now having moments in journeying where I come out with some kind of conclusion, or maybe even an action that I've come across that I've managed to extract, because you don't always extract them, because quite often you might have two or three and they overwrite each other, and you come out and here is something in front of you. Now, someone might challenge you and say, well, how do you know that's the right thing? And I think part of it is just a self-trust, maybe, that if you are spending time really thinking and contemplating and opening yourself up and listening, that you've got to have trust. Or maybe even beyond that, you've just got to give yourself over to a universe that's much bigger and powerful, more creative than you. And I think that's where this sort of phrase, the knowing, comes from. Another good example I had is when I've been in a room and I've met an individual, and without even knowing them, I've instinctively started talking to them about something in this kind of area that you wouldn't necessarily talk to anybody about. And they've come back to me immediately. I'm the same kind of person, and
Yes.
they've demonstrated to me immediately. They don't just understand it, but they are there. Now, I've not had a situation where I've said that to someone and they've kind of frowned and said, well, what on earth are you talking about? Because I've not raised it in the first place. So I believe that little example kind of gives you an example of knowing, where you can just feel that another human is the right kind of person to open up to.
Yes, that seems to be the case with me, and I'm talking to senior executives, and sometimes I mention it, and they go, "Oh yes," and it's weird because you think that this isn't what we should be talking about, and yet it opens up this whole area. I think for me there's two elements to it in a way. There's our Western idea of knowing, and I think that's where the question kind of comes from. In the sense is, oh, I know, um, because in the West we worship the intellect, and try and find a self-help author without a PhD. We love the rational mind, um, and it also makes us very visual because we centrally focus, and it we love the logic, so we connect the dots. So it's got to be an evidence-based belief system, and if we're in that, then what we do naturally is seek certainty all the time. We need to know: is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Do the facts add up? So you need to choose your source wisely, or your sources of the information, and you also need to trust your sources. And the problem for me with that way of thinking is that in times of uncertainty, which is chaos, and we'll get onto that in a second, more evidence is required to support the belief. So when the evidence doesn't show up, the mind scrambles to seek certainty, which is what anxiety is. And these days, with the stuff that's going on in the world, the anxiety is off the scale.
Yes. So now I remember now the context of the question from the listener as well, because I think I was having a discussion with them, and they were challenging me on something in particular. So I'd been looking at they'd been talking to me about happiness,
Right.
and what is it, and how do you achieve it? Because they'd almost been working their way up the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they felt like they were at the top in the self-actualization part of it. So then I started just saying to them, well, you do know that Maslow ended up going back to the drawing boards because he got challenged, didn't he, by Goff, who said you've missed a whole section
Yes.
Above that, which is called the transcendent section, and it's effectively where once you've got everything wrapped up under control in the self-actualization phase, which is still very much ego-driven, you then transcend into a higher phase, or you can transcend into a higher phase where exactly as you say, you learn how to naturally absorb all of the chaos and all of the changes around you, and it doesn't lead to fear, and then it doesn't lead to anxiety, and it actually then goes the other way. So when he was saying to me, Okay, so you get in this phase, and but how do you know? But does it mean that you're right all the time? And what is this definition of right? And I said it doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that I arrive at decisions without fear.
Yes.
That's the big difference, I think.
Yeah, because with this form of thinking, with the Western idea of centrally focused and visual and rational and all that stuff, what happens is we avoid chaos, because chaos means we've got to scramble to seek certainty, which is anxiety. And as we'll see, chaos is where the magic actually happens. So, could I talk about chaos for a few minutes and just, all right. So, to me, chaos,
Yeah.
loosely, is anything that isn't going how you thought it would go. If you want to make God laugh, show him your business plan, the title of that great book. So when you're late for a meeting, chaos. Your washing machine packs up, chaos. And in a way, the analogy I like is you're kind of like driving your little steam engine down a single track, and you notice a huge junction up ahead, and all the signals and switches and noise going on, and uncertainty and chaos. So what happens is the rational thinker says, right, pull onto the siding. I don't want to go anywhere near that mess. And what's happening now, that the world seems to be awakening, and each individual is getting the opportunity to clear huge, deep, old trauma, which is chaos. And in so doing, what happens is the collective vibe of the planet lifts. And I think that's what we're into now, because the people I speak to more and more, the karma that's coming up is huge. So the question logically is, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to pull onto the siding because I don't want any of that stuff. Whew, that was close. I nearly got to the magic, I'm so glad I missed it. So within the chaos is what's known as chaotic nodes,
Yeah.
where all the possibilities are. Nothing much happens in the siding, but we spend most of our lives there. You have to get into the chaos. So the only way out of it really is through it. And what I realized only recently, and I put something up on Facebook, I think, about it. When my children were young, I thought I was supposed to teach them. What I was actually supposed to do is learn from them, because all children are chaos magicians, right? They're all artists until we convince them beyond any doubt that they are not. And they naturally create chaos, and then they create fusion, and out of the fusion comes the magic. And it could be anything, but they never do it with fear. They're creative, they're intuitive, they're individual, and they're working from their heart. And this sounds a bit like Gnosis, which we're going to get into in a minute. But in the chaos, in what's known as chaos magic, there is no recipe. There's no 7 steps, 5 secrets, 3 degrees. There's none of that stuff. It's never done the same way twice. So you can't formulate it. You just have to do it full on, intuitively, in the moment. And this is weird, because this is not head stuff happening here. This is like we're winging it, which is a way, in a sense, that we do the podcast. We pretty much wing it, which is what we're doing now. What do you think about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. And certainly, let's go back to a very practical sort of application of it. What we have been talking about and working on for the last 2 years has essentially stopped me having any kind of moments of existential crisis, and that's what I used to probably have in the
Great.
past. Yeah, because everything becomes so overwhelming, the universe is so big. It's you start counting the nodes,
Yes.
and then once you get past a couple of million, the brain starts sizzling, and it becomes overwhelming. The endless possibilities, the combination, the scenarios, it can lead to catastrophization. There's fear, then there's anxiety. So when you talk about going through, I think that that very much resonates with me. You learn, you embrace the chaos, you enjoy the chaos, you feed off the chaos, and it gives you so much strength just to go through and to say, what do you got? What's going on? You know, I know what my intent is genuine and good. And embracing that chaos has been tremendous for me.
Great. Well, that brings us into how do you do it? Because there's the first question, kind of how are we going to do all this? And it comes back to the knowing, but in a different form. The word knowing comes from the word gnosis, which comes from the Gnostic Christians back in the day. And they knew what it was all about. So I guess to illustrate it, let's supposing that you and Paul, let's say, live in London, in the same area of London, and it's August, and I'm on the phone to Paul, and he says, "Greg, you're never going to believe this. It's August and it's snowing in London." I go, "Wow, that's amazing." 10 minutes later, I'm on a call to you, and you're going to say, "Greg, you're never going to believe this, but it's snowing in London," and I'm going to say, "I know. Paul just told me." But according to the Gnostics, the only way I can know is to be in London and it be snowing. And this is very, very different because it's visceral, it's experiential, and it's intuitive, but it's also peripheral. You don't focus in, you let your peripheral vision pick it up. Okay, this is reticular activity. Okay, so reticular activity, you decide to have a different car. I did this when I got my car. I wanted a new car. I knew the car I wanted and everything. And suddenly I saw all the cars like that on the road. They were everywhere. Why? Because now my mind is tuned through my intention to pick this up. I'm not trying to pick it up. This is the difference. We're not working at this. The mind is automatically doing it. So you don't need to believe anything. You don't need to believe a guru or what you read in the newspaper. Your mind automatically picks it up. So in that way, it meshes really well with chaos because it's through the calmness of mind, which is gnosis, that we can be creative, which is exactly what you just said. And then this enables what I call fusion. And fusion is kind of like love, for instance. It's just this calm that comes in. And out of this emerges the magic. So I've got a little story for you, and I'd like to know what you think about it. So I'm just going to hit you with this cold. None of this is rehearsed, right? So if a person was asked to describe the fragrance of the rose or a rose, they couldn't do it because you can only know the fragrance of a rose by being with that particular rose. It's visceral, it's an interaction, and it's an individual experience. But then you know what that particular rose smells like, what the fragrance of that particular rose is. That's the gnosis. Okay. And someone can say, okay, so then what if you had two people inhaling the same fragrance from the same rose at the same time? Each of them would still have a different experience because we filter through our senses. And also the fragrance of the rose may be affected by the weather, the time of day, the flowering cycle, whatever it is. So the gnosis, which when confronted with chaos gets creative, producing the fusion, and out of which emerges the magic. And the magic comes in all kinds of forms. So it could come like in the revelation as to the redundancy of me saying, Tom, the fragrance of your rose is incorrect. What do you think about that?
I think I'm a big fan of Gnosticism. I think I've been doing quite a lot of reading on it. I think your story kind of comes back to this idea that we have all the answers within ourselves. It's just we are often conditioned that we need to seek the answers elsewhere. Two people, smelling the rose, may or may not have two different perceptions of what the smell is, but two people going in on themselves, journeying, listening, thinking, are most likely going to come out with things that are relevant to themselves. They might not be relevant to the other person, and
Yes.
the knowing then comes into saying, I'm going to act on that, or I'm going to explore that, because that is my experience. And what you and I think in our discussions have kind of come to the conclusion on is that is a good, wholesome thing to do, and can, or we have examples of it being very helpful to the individual, whether it be helping them to cope with real life situations, or to understand themselves a bit more, or deal with fear, anxiety, existentialism, whatever it might be. You have the experience with the rose yourself, and you draw your own conclusions from it. And you don't have to listen, you don't have to be told by somebody else what your experience is, or what your experience should be, or that it was the wrong experience. And then the lovely thing about Gnosticism, and if you tie it back into the rose analogy, is that if you lose a lot of the fear, or if you are in a place where you are very happy to embrace the chaos, then smelling the rose can be an incredibly visceral experience, because I think you've got more capacity to take in the experience, and it might trigger thoughts, memories, a whole load of different magical things. But and in a way, that's then the magic itself, isn't it? Because you're going in with no fear, and you don't know where it's going to take you, but you've got the intent.
And the beautiful thing is that the knowing is yours, right? So I know what I know, and it doesn't mean anyone else needs to know it. It's not for anyone else.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's the intent that starts it all. And the beautiful thing about the knowing, the gnosis, is that it means we can sit with the chaos. And I have to say, I don't welcome chaos. I know it's happening all the time, and when I'm in it, I think, okay, I know I have to go through it, but I'd rather not. So I'm probably much more conditioned over a longer period than other people. But it's chaos is how we came to be here. Literally, if you think about the scrum of sperm trying to get to the egg, that's chaos, right? And then when that one sperm connects, that's the fusion, and out of the fusion emerges the magic that is you and me. Okay. So it's also how I came to Journey, because I was never into any of this stuff. I'm the last person I thought would ever do this. But I had what they call the dark night of the soul, or as I think of it, as the night of the long knives, and I've had many. And the one that woke me took me completely by surprise, because I wasn't in chaos. I was simply sitting on my patio when the world went strange and the journey started. So, we haven't got too much time to go into that. We can go into that next time. But it's really trusting your intuition based on your intent, and let your mind do the work instead of you thinking you have to figure it out.
Yeah, Dark Night of the Soul. That could be quite an episode.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about that one. So we're pretty much we're coming into the out of time slot already. So what's around for you? What are you thinking?
Goodness. So I'm going to do a little bit more thinking this week about your Rose story. I hadn't heard that before, but I like it, and I immediately kind of my mind started pinging in different directions. But no, I mean, otherwise, I'm going to enjoy a birthday party. I'm going to keep it nice and simple, and hug a lot of people that I love.
Great. Well, happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you, Greg.
And that pretty much brings us to the end of this particular episode. I hope it might have had some effect, if only to pass the time. But if you enjoyed our little meanderings, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you're using. And we'd really like to hear your thoughts, questions, experiences. You can reach us at Facebook, email at us at hello@pinballinthemachine.com. The links will be below. So from myself, Greg, good day. And from my friend Tom,
Cheers, guys. See you later.
yeah, we hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.